it's like, I'm not the only person talking to God. And I trust that these other people have received revelation from God for the world to establish sort of the framework within I operate. And so where I kind of, and again, just to contrast here, I struggle with that sort of I trust myself mentality, because I have to check myself because I'm sinful and I'm prideful and I'm biased. And so I want to seek the God that has revealed himself to the world, not just the God of my own imagination. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Thoughtful Faith podcast with your host, Jacob Hansen. That's me. And today I am joined by Bridger Coburn. Bridger, how you doing?
I am doing really well.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, cool. Well, the reason we're here kind of having this conversation is because Bridger actually made a video that was critical on TikTok of my take kind of on some of the stuff going on with Dr. Julie Hanks, very known, well-known LDS psychologist. And I wanted to have a conversation with Bridger where we could kind of go over those differences in a civil and respectable manner, so that other people can see that people can disagree and still have good civil conversations. So thanks for being willing to do it, Bridger.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I love dialogue. So
excellent. Well, real quick, tell the audience a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I grew up in the church, experienced miracles, everything, just normal growing up in the church. And I was very Orthodox. So probably 2 years ago, I probably would be your number one fan, I think. Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything you say. And then I entered into a faith crisis, which actually, with the conversation, comes up like after following people like Julie Hanks, right? So we'll have to talk about that. But I entered into a year-long faith crisis. I almost left the church. But after over 1,000 hours of study, I personally came to the conclusion that there's just as much evidence the church is true as there is that it's not. So from my lived experience, it became a decision to believe. So based on, the doctrine, the emotional reasons, all of those things, I chose to believe. Now, when reconstructing that belief, the orthodox ideas I had about the church, I tore completely down to nothing. And I had to rebuild from the bottom up. So a lot of my unorthodox, nuanced approaches are a result of that, of me rebuilding in a way that makes sense and is consistent, and maintains my integrity along the way.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then you do is it a kind of a TikTok? You have a TikTok that has a decent little following. I've seen.
Yeah. So I started. So I'm obsessed with church history, right? Church doctrine, all those things. I love talking about it. No one wants to talk about it with me. So I started the TikTok about 3 months ago, around April. Just kind of responding to some criticism of the church. You know who Dan McClellan is?
Who is it?
Dan McClellan. He's a biblical scholar. He's big on TikTok. Huge on TikTok.
Name rings a bell. Yes. I have seen some of his videos.
Okay. So I'm kind of copying his style. Like you take apart like little clips. Like if you saw my criticism of you, right? I take little clips of like mostly content that is critical of the church, and I clip it apart and I respond to it. And it's done well. I've made a lot of friends, had a really productive conversations, learned a lot. Bridge thoughts on TikTok. Yeah. But sometimes I'm a little blunt and straightforward. So,
well, I've been accused of that myself from time to time. It's funny though, because even though you and I maybe come from different perspectives, and it's funny because I get people who will say that I'm really Orthodox, and then I'll actually get people that say that I'm not Orthodox. And so I usually tell people I'm pretty like middle of the road Latter-day Saint. I think that because I kind of get it from both sides, and so. That's kind of where I frame myself. But with us kind of coming together today, I like to have conversations of disagreement. I like to have them where there's sort of the ethos of the conversation is to pardon the French, but what the hell is going on? We disagree. Let's both kind of put down our swords and go, why do we disagree here? Like, what's the, let's try and understand our disagreement. And now, granted, at the bottom of the disagreement, you try to understand it. There may be fundamental differences, and we have to just deal with those. But at the same time, I think half the battle to sort of resolving a disagreement and or making it smaller is to have a good conversation where both sides in good faith are trying to understand one another, not necessarily agree, but at least to make sure that, like, I understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to say, and to steel man what you're saying as best I can. You know, don't straw man it, don't give the crappy version and attack that, but really try and make sure I understand where you're coming from before I offer any thoughts of my own.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Cool. Well, that is what we're going to attempt to do today, folks. So real quick, let's just begin before we go into like my video that I have on Julie Hanks, which we'll watch a little bit of. Just could you summarize a little bit about what is it? What was kind of your general feelings about where where there's a disconnect between me and you as far as Julie Hanks goes?
Yeah. And so first and foremost, I want to say I'm not a Julie Hanks apologist. You know, I'm willing to recognize mistakes in everybody. I don't want to come across as like a Julie Hanks apologist. My perspective is Julie Hanks is an important part of our church. I think her perspectives are valuable. I think they mean a lot to a lot of people for good. I think she does more good for the church and its culture and its doctrine than she does bad. And I see a lot of pushback against Julie, mainly from DesNat community, but also from more Orthodox standard members of the church that I just think is wrong.
Well, I hope we can get the word out. And just so we know, I invited Julie Hanks to come on. I still do. Like, Julie, I would love to have this conversation with you. But I also would say this. I'm not a DesNat. She went out and said that I'm some DesNat guy. And I have a post on my website that talks all about my history of actually being against the DesNat people. So I just want to kind of put that out there that I'm not necessarily part of that group.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see you as a DesNat. I mean, you said a swear word, so, and I don't think they swear. So yeah, no, I think it would be valuable if Julie come on. I understand why maybe she's hesitant too. I think it's a little intimidating, right? Based on the video you made about her, in my opinion, that's not a very inviting way to come on, you know? So I understand her hesitancy, but I think that conversation would be valuable. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, then let's get into some of the video. Let's take a look at some of the specific critiques that I had of her, and then I'd love to get some of your opinions on these. So I'm going to pull up on the screen here to get started. So this is part of the video, but there's no audio to it, so I'll just kind of read it. There's a post here from Julie Hanks that she put on her Instagram that says, "We live in a culture where we are taught to rely on external authority for direction, information, and validation. Instead of looking outward, I want you to look inside of yourself to find how you feel and what you want. When you are true to yourself, you honor your personal authority." And then the Faith Matters podcast had her on, and they talked all about this sort of idea of the self and developing a sense of self. And there's a clip here that I just wanted to kind of play from that. It's about a minute or so long. And then when we stop that clip, I'll give you the floor and let you see what you think of it. So let's get into it.
Perfect.
It has been very helpful to my mental health to claim personal authority over my life. That ultimately trumps everything else. So ultimately, it's a choice to do what that leader has asked. It's also a choice to not do what they ask. So claiming that as my choice, is how you, like, I may choose to not obey.
As I listen to members of the church all over the world, this is how they define agency. It's the ability to choose, and I can do what I want. That's false. Why do we have agency? It is to choose Him, not to choose what we want. The hymn is called "Choose the Right," not choose what you want. So from tonight on, don't ever use a misunderstood concept of agency to justify sin.
It's like for the rest of the...
So let's stop right there. So she talks about this idea of personal authority and kind of putting that first. And that, by the way, I would say is probably the central theme, I think, that where I have my kind of central core disagreement with that. Go ahead and give me your take on kind of what that means and why what your feelings are on it.
Yeah, let me hit it on two parts. So my first pushback is going to be against the video at large. So not specifically itself. We'll get to that second. Okay. I just want to say, I don't think these types of videos are productive. And what I mean by that is I spend a lot of time on ex-Mormon TikTok. I spend a lot of time looking at criticism of the church. And I have seen this exact same video multiple times, but with Dallin H. Oaks or with Russell M. Nelson or Jeffrey R. Holland, where they take little clips and then they post little other clips of other church leaders. So my first pushback is going to be against the theme of the entire video. And I'm going to be blunt. I just think it's a little lazy and a little condescending, the style of video. Not saying that against you. I just think of the style of the video, right? So I think it would be much more productive if you more have laid out your arguments, took a little more time, and gave her your pushback specifically, which I will give Julie some pushback probably on this next part about pornography. But yeah, that's my take. That's just my criticism of the video. I guess what's your pushback to my criticism?
So my only thought was so with the video, what I wanted to do was to very comprehensively, in a short window, but with as much material as I can, and say, hey, look, here's something that she's saying that I feel like goes contrary to what the church teaches. Okay. Because I wanted to see if there is indeed a highlight between the things that Julie Hanks says and then the things that the brethren say, so that we can say, hey, look, we got to be very careful with the things that Julie is saying because they're not true. And so specifically to this point, the little 1 minute segment that I had on this particular argument was about the notion of personal authority. And basically the way I see it and the way I've heard her explain it is that, and she actually came out later and clarified this, which I think was somewhat a response to this video, I think, is the idea that personal authority is agency plus personal revelation. So if you have a revelation from God that tells you to do something different than what the brethren want, and that plus your agency to choose makes up your personal authority to choose differently. Because if God tells you to do something differently than the brethren, you go with what God has said. And that, I think, is sort of my steel man of her perspective. Is that the way that you see it?
Yes, I agree with Julie and I agree with you. Sorry for the cop out.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, so I agree with both. Take it piece by piece. Like I look at the missionary handbook, your loyalty is first to God, then your mission president, then your companion. And I see that as a correct principle. I look at scriptures like D&C 58, is it 26, where it's not expedient that man should be required in all things or commanded in all things, right? And the example that Julie uses, because I'm not going to put words in Julie's mouth, the only example I know that she used, especially on that podcast with, I can't remember the podcast. What was it? Faith Matters. On that podcast with Faith Matters, she talked about how one of the brethren counseled women not to go to college. Well, she felt inspired to go to college. Was she wrong to go to college? I don't think so. I think God is more than perfectly capable of contradicting that priesthood leader. I think he's more than capable of contradicting his opinion for individual people in different circumstances. And I think Julie going to college was an inspired decision.
Yeah, no, and I mean, are we gonna? I guess my question there would be: has the church ever had a general policy given by the brethren that said that women couldn't go to college?
No, but the example that she gave when it came to honoring herself was that example. So I'm not sure if she's saying that it's perfectly okay to disobey everything or what exactly she's saying there, but I just know that the one example that she gave is totally fine in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree because I don't think that what that person, if a church leader ever told a woman that they're not to go to college, I would think there's good reason to think that that was not inspired specifically because there's plenty of church leaders that say women should go and get an education. And I believe if my understanding of it is it actually specifically had to do with Ezra Taft Benson, basically saying that women needed to focus on being at home and that working mothers were the growth of working mothers was a problem essentially. And she felt that, no, I want to have a career and work outside the home. right? I believe that's, if I'm not mistaken, that was what she specifically was referring to. With that in mind, I don't think the church ever had a position that women couldn't. It just was counsel. I think that there may have been a misunderstanding in the council. So I think that if she felt that the Lord wanted her to go outside the home and to work, I believe that absolutely could have been from God. But this is where this is the analogy that I use well, let's first pose the question, and I'm going to pose it to you first. There's a real predicament in the church. Whose authority is more ultimate? Personal authority or the authority of the brethren? What you feel you should do or what the prophets have said to do? And what do you do if there's a conflict between what the self wants and feels, if it contradicts what the teachings of the church are very directly? So how do you reconcile that? Which one trumps out?
Yeah, like with the missionary handbook, I believe God trumps always, even if it's directly from the prophet. Now we look at the question of what does it mean to sustain a church leader? And I've heard your take on this a little bit. We can dive into this. From my opinion, sustaining means to both support and to endure. That's what it means to sustain a church leader. And I don't think sustain means always agree. I don't think sustain means that every policy, every recommendation, every doctrine is always inspired. I just think it means we give the benefit of doubt. I think it means that we fight for them to be treated fairly and we look for truth before we look for untruth. But I don't think it means that there is never an untruth or never foolish tradition or even wicked tradition coming from the brethren.
And I would agree with that. But this is where the trick comes. Is that revelation coming from God? That I can see. So here's kind of the way I frame it, right? Obviously, God and the truth are the ultimate authority, right? Mm-hmm. If it's true, I don't care what the brethren say. If they contradict the truth, they're contradicting God and they're wrong. And so I don't go along with that. But I think of it in this way. So imagine if I had 12 of the greatest brain surgeons on earth and I had brain cancer and they all gave the same counsel to me on what to do about this brain surgery. And I said, guys, I just feel inside, I have this intuition that I should do something different. Now, here's the thing. Maybe that person is right, and God is literally giving them a revelation to contradict exactly what the brain surgeons told them. But I'm sorry, I'm going to say, you better have a dang good explanation as to why you're contradicting the 12 greatest brain surgeons in the world. And maybe you have a great argument. Maybe you can convince me that they are wrong on this. But if you don't, if you're just like, well, my personal authority trumps their authority as the 12 greatest brain surgeons on earth, I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, I have more trust in the 12 greatest brain surgeons on earth than the personal intuitions of said person, be that Julie Hanks or whoever. So do you see how that just claiming personal authority, like just nakedly claiming it, is that trumps everything? Do you see how that could be problematic?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I agree. It's definitely can be problematic. My thought is, one, where is Julie claiming that personal authority? The only example I know of was the college example, which we just talked about, which wasn't problematic. So I'm not sure where the pushback is for Julie. Like, where is she claiming that personal authority? Where is problematic?
So I would like to, I think that'd be a good segue into the next section of the video that I wanted to look at, because it does seem, according to some of the things that she says, that at least the impression that I get is that very much your personal authority kind of is like a trump card. I mean, it seems to be if there's a conflict, you go with what you feel inside over everything else. And anyway, let's go ahead and look, because there are a lot of times where I feel like what she's pushing is inconsistent with the brethren, and she does it under the banner of, well, personal authority trumps all. So
yeah, quick question for you. Ahead. So do you think, because you talked about 12 greatest brain surgeons, and I don't know if that accurately categorizes how I view the 12. That's a whole conversation. But do you think that the 12 in joint doctrine and teachings have ever been wrong?
Oh, absolutely. Of course they have.
They've been, like, all 12 of them have been wrong.
I reject prophetic infallibility 100%. Like
Okay.
they're fallible and they can make mistakes. So just like, and I would use the brain surgeons in that exact same example. I would say
maybe there's new methods that came up, or maybe they were
Yeah.
doing something wrong in the past. Yeah,
absolutely.
I 100% agree with that. So to me, the existence of fallibility also requires the emphasis on personal authority. I think there's a reason why President Nelson says you cannot survive these last days without personal revelation. To me, in my nuanced approach, right, with the existence of problematic things that have been taught by all 12 members of the Quorum of the 12 and First Presidency in past church leadership, forces us to come to terms with the reality that sometimes our personal authority might be ahead of the brethren.
Okay, let's go ahead and watch some of the clips here, and we'll continue that discussion. So let me go ahead and pull it up.
Oh, did you skip
Priesthood
over
law.
the pornography one?
Ultimately,
Oh, we'll go back to that.
Okay.
I'm kind of jumping around a little bit just because there are certain areas I wanted to emphasize.
Okay.
So so again, let's go back here.
Line.
ultimately, which is one of the great things about our faith, is that we are entitled to personal revelation.
Right.
And so that, I think, in terms of a self, that has to be our guide.
It is crucial that any personal revelation we feel we receive be consonant with the teachings of the Lord and his prophets.
She says, honoring your own authority is hard when you haven't been taught to trust yourself. I cannot emphasize enough, however, how necessary it is to learn. After all, you are the ultimate authority in your own life. And this was an interesting comment that someone made. They said, I heard someone say in church, this is on her thread today, that God is the author of your life. Nope, you are. God comes along for the ride. You should check in with him along the way. It is our decisions that create our life.
Okay, hold up right here.
Okay.
So I have a big problem with, like, I guess, highlighting comments in order to
Oh,
basically
I would.
push. You know what I'm saying?
No, I agree with you there. Let me pull you back up here. So I agree. Pulling up a comment from somebody like this, it doesn't mean that Julie endorses that comment. What I am saying, though, and the reason I brought it up, was to show that there are people who interpret what she says in that way. That's the message they're getting from her, it seems.
So my pushback would be, what if people interpreted problematic teachings in church history in the wrong way? Does that fall back on the leader, just as it would on Julie?
To a certain extent, I do think that a leader would indeed be, if you use imprecise language, and I've even been critical of the brethren when they say things that maybe even I think I get what they're saying, but they just said it poorly. And that's the thing. I think that what Julie might be talking about, maybe the gap isn't that big between us. You know what I'm saying? The problem is that the way she's expressing these things, to say that you're the ultimate authority, when really what you should be saying is God is the ultimate authority in your life, not you. That it's, if nothing else, it's definitely slippery language that I find at least troubling. But let's continue here.
I think you're good. I think, like, the highlighting of the comment, with this, it seems to me almost like under the banner of heaven, right? Trying to represent bad examples, bad interpretations of our faith, and pushing that onto the church at large. To me, I don't see that as a super genuine criticism of Julie, just in my opinion. So that's just a pushback I had.
No, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So on we go. Let's go to the next section here. She says, I trust my own feelings and thoughts. I trust myself. That was one of her posts on Instagram here.
Do you find that as
Trust in the
problematic?
Lord with all thy.
Well, I was gonna contrast it here with what the scriptures teach about trusting yourself. So
Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths.
Yeah, that's that.
So in that little clip, my point was, I think that even if it's just imprecise wording, we believe that we don't lean unto our own selves, and that we're not the center of the universe, but that God is ultimately who we're following and who we commit to and who we literally take the name upon him. I've heard that to be baptized and to be made a Christian is to have an identity transplant. It's to allow your old self to die and your new self to be totally defined by the will of Jesus Christ. And so anyway, let's
So do you
go ahead.
do
Go ahead.
you, yeah, so with like, I guess I don't see the controversy here. I trust myself, because I would say that too. I trust myself because I'm the one in connection with God. I trust that my relationship is with God, and I'm in prayer with him. I'm speaking to him as often as can. I believe he's speaking to me. When I say I trust myself, that's what I mean. It doesn't mean I'm rejecting God's authority in my life. It just means that I'm accepting my relationship with God. Therefore, I trust myself. Does that make sense? So
yeah, and I would this is my so what you're saying, just to kind of steel man it, is that when you say you trust yourself, you're trusting in that relationship that you have with God.
when I say
you
I
can
trust
communicate
myself,
with God.
I trust God, basically, because I believe God is in communication with me, and I believe my integrity, my desires, my hopes, my passions, I believe those are of God because I believe he taught them to me. So that's what I mean when I trust myself.
So, and it's funny because I would have a very different perspective. I don't trust myself. I worry all the time. Is this from God or is this just me? And that's why the words of the prophet matter so much to me, because they act as that check, right? I can check my own sort of desires against not just the words of the living prophet, not even of just the living quorum of the 12, but across the entire collective witness of God's prophets throughout time. And to me, it's like, I'm not the only person talking to God. And I trust that these other people have received revelation from God for the world to establish sort of the framework within I operate. And so where I kind of, and again, just to contrast here, I struggle with that sort of I trust myself mentality, because I have to check myself because I'm sinful and I'm prideful and I'm biased. And so I want to seek the God that has revealed himself to the world, not just the God of my own imagination.
Gotcha. So like, where's my thought going here? So like, don't you believe that everything good is of God,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I mean when I trust, when good things, good passions that I have, good desires, I trust those because I believe they're from God. I believe I'm a child of God who naturally has a desire to grow and become like him and grow a relationship with him. So again, when I say I trust myself, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I don't think Julie's too far off from that. And if that is what she's saying, is that problematic?
So you're kind of saying that, like, you trust because there are good things out there, you experience them, you intuit that these things are good.
I believe there are natural and taught desires that I have that are from God, purely from God, from the Spirit, that I trust. And so when I say I trust myself, those are the things I'm trusting.
You're trusting in the things that are good in your experience. Is that in kind of your lived experience that these things are good? Because what I guess this is what I'm trying to get at. This is where the disconnect is for me on that, is defining the good, right? Because there's all sorts of things that can seem good, but that are not good. And to me, the collective voice of God's prophets over time act as sort of the testimony to what the good is, what the nature of Christ is, because it's very easy in the world with all the influences to personally be swept up in thinking that which is good is evil and that which is evil is good. And so the scriptures and God's prophets act as sort of a check on my potential to spin off into the social frenzies of the world that will call things good that are not good.
Gotcha. So I think, the issue there is defining what is good, right? To me, the scriptures and Christ, specifically Christ, is what my definition of good is. I believe that prophets exist to interpret that and to continue to teach and guide. It's not perfect. I think they stumble. But my ultimate authority of what is good is Jesus. And
Excellent.
so, again, if that's where Julie is lining up, where I'm lining up here, is that problematic?
No, absolutely not. I think we would agree there. So we would agree that Christ defines what's good. And my thing is that is what prophets and apostles are. They're the special witnesses of Jesus Christ over time, so that I don't create in my own head my Jesus instead of like the real Jesus. Because if the experts on who Jesus are, kind of like the greatest brain surgeons, the special witnesses of Jesus Christ say this is the nature of Jesus Christ, but and my ideas about Christ conflict with that, well, then I'm not following the actual Jesus Christ. I'm following the Jesus Christ of my own imagination, And so that's where I think, and you said yourself that the scriptures are, and that's all the scriptures are. They're the collective witness of God's kind of special authorized servants to make known to the world his mind and will, right? So any other thoughts on that before we kind of move on?
Yeah, I had a couple. They went somewhere, but so just to clarify, it's not like, if that's the framework Julie has, that's not very problematic.
Mm-hmm. No. If Christ is the center, and the prophets are sort of Christ's witnesses that we use to check our self against, no, I would think that we'd align up on that a lot. But let's continue
So
and see some of the things she says.
Just a quick question on that. Do you think the prophets are always lining up with Jesus? Like,
No.
they're always teaching what is good? Again, so if that's a reality, there's nuance there, which adds value to personal authority. I think giving perspective to Julie's position.
Oh, I agree. And I would say, like, here's the way I'd put it. Again, the 12 greatest brain surgeons in the world are not, they're not infallible. They can and do make mistakes even today. The greatest, like if you literally had the 12 greatest brain surgeons, they would make mistakes. They still wouldn't be able to get it right. But my thing is that if you are going to go against them, I want to hear a good explanation that convinces me why they're wrong, using reason, using science, using, something. But to simply say, well, I feel like God doesn't agree with them, maybe that's the way you feel and you're entitled to that. But I don't find it very convincing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I guess two things on that. I think that's good. Does Julie owe you an explanation?
I think Julie owes,
or does she owe an explanation to God?
I think that if she's out publicly saying things that seem to contradict the brethren, then I would hope that she has a very good explanation as to why. And what I see is oftentimes it falls back on this notion of personal authority as the explanation, where that's not a very good explanation. It's kind of like, well, why do you disagree with the brain surgeons? I mean, if you give me an explanation about the way the molecules in the brain interact and all that, like, then you're making an argument. But if you're just like, well, I claim my personal authority, it's like, well, I trust their authority.
So I'm not aware of an example of where Julie contradicted the brethren and was just kind of threw her hands up in the air and just said personal authority, right? I'm not aware of that. I don't know that exists. I think everything I've seen her perspectives laid out with statistics, with ideas, a lot of times it's just therapy. It's not even gospel. It's just therapy ideas and her practices that she gained with 30 years of experience with working with LDS clients who had a hard time in the church, and just healthy approaches that she saw that improved their relationship with the church. That's what I see most of the time. I'm not sure where, I guess, this kind of hands throwing personal authority is coming from.
Well, let's continue on through the video and see what's in there.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
Let me pull this up.
That is interesting. I mean, I think maybe what it reveals is, like, are you prioritizing this thing that is outside of yourself over developing the self? Like, is the relationship more important than developing a self?
If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it.
Is there a way to just, I know you can't guarantee, but like a way to ensure that this isn't going to break a relationship, whether it's a relationship with the church or a relationship with a person?
There is no guarantee. It may break. And so the alternative is you don't develop. But some people, as they develop a sense of self, they see, or they decide, their self decides, I can't be associated with this organization.
Yeah.
And that's their choice.
So she says here, after that, one of the things she posted online is you can be connected to deity without organized religion, and you can also have a connection to religion without a connection to deity. Now, this part was really problematic to me because she basically said, in order for you to develop a self, you essentially may have to break your relationship with the church. And I mean, do we really prioritize the development of our self over our covenants when you literally have Jesus saying, to deny yourself and to follow him? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, first, her Instagram post that you shared there, I don't think there's anything problematic with that. Do you?
That you can be connected to deity without organized religion. I mean, you can vaguely be connected to deity, but our kind of core doctrine is that the way that we truly connect with deity in a salvific way is through covenant. And
okay, so, and I'm trying to be chill here, right? But we're looking at 99.9% of the world, right? Are we willing to say that they're not capable of being connected to deity, or not to the extent that like members can?
It's going to depend on what you're going to mean by being connected to deity. What it sounds like she's saying is that, hey, you don't need organized religion to be connected to deity. When our doctrine is very much come to us and deepen your connection with deity unto salvation, because a connection to deity that doesn't lead you to salvation is, I mean, not worth that much. Like, we're trying to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. And the only way that you do that is through covenant relationship with God. And so when you tell people that, hey, you don't need our church, organized religion, to have a connection with deity, while technically that's sort of true, like, yeah, you'll be able to feel the Spirit, but it's like, and you won't enter the celestial kingdom or reach your highest potential. It's like, that was kind of a big part for her to leave out,
See, that's where I disagree. And again, I'm looking at 99% of the world. I think this life is about being good human beings. I think if these ideas, and again, I'm not negating, I think covenants and ordinances are beautiful and important and essential, but I do not think they're the primary purpose of this life. I think the primary purpose of this life is to become good human beings, to do
so
good
quick,
with morality.
I just want to make sure I understand this point. So you don't see the primary purpose of life as making and keeping covenants with our Father in heaven?
No, I do not. And did Jesus teach that?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that he said basically the only way to enter into the kingdom of heaven was by being born again by water and the Spirit.
Yeah, he mentioned that, and then again, that's valuable and important, and it's part of getting to the celestial kingdom. That is a part of our journey here and through the eternities.
It's a
requirement. Yes, I absolutely agree. But we have the millennium and all these opportunities to do that. But again, if that was the prime focus, the number one focus of this life, why was that not more of an emphasis in the Sermon on the Mount? Why did Jesus not spend time teaching these things, teaching about the endowment ceremony, teaching about baptism, teaching about the gift in specific ways that we structure it today? To me, this life has to be, logically, it has to be about who we are as people, what we do with the attributes of Christ that we naturally come to learn, because we're looking at 99% of the world. I think God is smarter than to just not take care of 99% of the world.
Well, no, and there's a part of that to which I agree. So I'm gonna focus on the part that I agree on here first. You're right. 99.99% of people in the world are not going to join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this life. But where I'd push back on this is, but if you are a baptized member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you have taken upon yourself the covenant to bring the kingdom of God to earth by helping every creature, as Jesus said at the end of his life, to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in order to build the kingdom of God on earth. So to sort of say, hey guys, you don't need organized religion, can very easily be translated over to, you don't need the kingdom of God. And that to me is like, I mean, what is our message if not that we are here to bring the kingdom of God to the earth, and we want all people to enter into covenant relationship with God?
To me, our message is kindness. Like Joseph Smith taught, our religion is kindness. And going back, I had a specific pushback. I can't remember exactly what it was. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I'm sorry, that is I just want everyone to be very clear. That is a fundamental disagreement that you and I have. That the central point of the gospel is kindness. I don't think that is supported by the scriptures. I don't think that is supported by the collective witness of Jesus Christ. I think that is a very nice feeling thing that people like to do. But
then I guess why did Joseph Smith say kindness is our religion?
I think kindness is what a person who is baptized and keeping covenants with Christ.
You and I both know how smart Joseph was, right? We respect him as the dispensational prophet. He is very well intended with his words. Why did he say kindness is our religion? Why didn't he say covenants? Why didn't he say priesthood? Why did he say kindness specifically? If that really is such a fundamental disagreement.
I would interpret it to say that kindness is our religion. It is the part of our religion that when you make covenants with God, you are covenanting to love God and to love your fellow man. And if you're going to love your fellow man, you are going to be kind to them. Now, with that said, kindness doesn't mean affirmation. It doesn't mean, universal affirmation, let's say. It doesn't mean apathy, which is where you just allow people to do things that lead them away from God, right? And I look at a post like that, which says you can be connected to deity without organized religion, which is essentially to say you can be connected to deity without the church, is a form of apathy, not a form of love. If you love someone, you want them to enter into covenant so that they can reach their highest potential.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I guess you're going back, and I think that's a fine interpretation. I still take it at face value. I think kindness should and can and should be our religion, and I think that's what Christ taught. Center to his teachings. But we look at so you mentioned a baptized member, they covenant to basically be a missionary, to bring people into the fold. Where is that? Where do they covenant that?
When they covenant to keep Christ's commandments. And Christ's commandment was to take his gospel to the world and to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Because to me, the baptismal covenant in D&C, I think, is at 2037. And in Mosiah, I'm not aware of where it says your covenant to go and be a missionary. I'm aware of we take upon ourselves the name of Christ, trying to represent him and be like him, to be diligent in following his commandments. And what was the third part? But yeah, that's to me what the baptismal covenant is. And there's nuance there. There's definitely nuance there. But I guess I don't see where that is specifically part of the baptismal covenant. Now, I think it's an easy interpretation to take the next logical step, right? To be diligent in following Christ's commandments, but it's not specifically a part of the baptismal covenant.
Interesting. Well, let's continue here. I'm going to push forward a little bit into the video here and continue to see kind of where I see this sort of personal authority and the development of the self, where this kind of leads her down some paths that I find a little bit problematic. So let me get this going here.
I thought you would be a great person because you.
So real quick, just as a quick a backdrop on this particular guest that she had on. So she's
this is Stacy
Harkey, okay, and Stacy at this time he's left the church. He is living an openly gay lifestyle, and this is her sort of take on where he is now in his life, now that he's left the church and embraced his homosexuality as his identity.
You seem to have really come into your own and found your purpose. So I
did find this tweet by him interesting. I included it when he left BYU. He said, "Me, black and gay, leaving BYU with a diploma. I'm going to do black and gay stuff." So let's continue.
I know the secrets.
So she said that she wanted to know the secrets, and he has a post here for those who aren't watching this that are listening to it. He has a post on Facebook saying, "Coming out and embracing myself has been one of the scariest and best decisions of my life. It hasn't been without hardship, but everything I've experienced has only testified of how good and right it is. I'm happier and more whole than I ever could be. Be bold, be gay, be you."
First time in my life, I felt really good about my sexuality.
Mm.
Felt like it was the first time I felt like denying myself. I'm essentially denying one of his most beautiful creations.
These false prophets and false teachers even attack the inspired proclamation on the family issue.
So I have in the background, obviously, the words of that's Elder Ballard, but then I have on here these quotes that she has out, like the belief that LGBTQ folks need to live a life of celibacy, or in other words, keep the law of chastity, and loneliness has contributed to a sense of worthlessness, hopelessness, and high suicide rates amongst LGBTQ church members. And when she talks about the proclamation on the family, she says the document also leaves no room for LGBTQ people, which is such a source of pain to many.
To the world in 1995 by the First Presidency and the 12 Apostles.
And it feels so much like your typical like Marvel story or like some superhero story where it's like this thing that I hated so much ends up being one of my greatest strengths. And
Your
so
superpower.
yeah, my superpower is gay. It is. It really is. Anyways.
As I said from this pulpit a year ago, our hearts reach out to those who refer to themselves as gays and lesbians. We love and honor them as sons and daughters of God. They are welcome in the church. It is expected, however, that they follow the same God-given rules of conduct that apply to everyone else, whether single or married.
And so I moved farther. I started going on dates, and I was experiencing feelings and excitement and things I'd never experienced before. And I was like, this is pretty good. And so I processed, and now here I am. I've been out since 2018. I've dated wonderful men. I've had some long-term relationships, short terms. Okay, I'm like rambling now, but
I love it. No, you're great. This is great. This is exactly, we want to hear your story and how you became more authentic.
For example,
So actually, I'm gonna play this quote by Elder Holland real quick before we go on.
we have to be careful that love and empathy do not get interpreted as condoning and advocacy.
And then she posted the day after he said that, she posted, "Love is advocacy." Okay, so all I'm gonna do here is, would you at least agree that she is contradicting publicly the teachings of the church and the brethren?
Yeah, in that case, I would, and I think that's okay. I think she is more than okay to do that, and still be a good standing member of the church who is valuable. And I actually somewhat agree with Julie on love as advocacy. I think she could have handled this post a little better. But is Jesus not the advocate? Is Jesus not love? To me, love absolutely can, and in a lot of cases is advocacy. In a lot of cases, it's not. There's nuance there.
So
Yeah.
do you believe that homosexual behavior is sinful?
This is a hard question. It's a hard question.
Is it
I
though?
hope-
I mean, based on the scriptures teach that it's a.
They don't. They absolutely don't. No. What scripture teaches that?
So you have multiple from Paul and from the Old Testament, and I'm familiar with the interpretations where it referred to male prostitution and stuff. And Timber Harward, I think is how you say his last name, has an excellent post on that subject. I actually think, just before we get derailed on that and the scriptural interpretation behind that, we'll agree to disagree there and save that for another conversation. I think that'd be a really fun one to like do a debate on. But regardless, I think the point that I'm getting at here, regardless if we think it isn't sinful or it is sinful, the church maintains that it is.
Okay. Well,
And
the church maintained that interracial marriage was wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
so is there room? Now, my question is not whether you, I respect whatever you believe with the church's current stance on that, but is it wrong? Or is there room for it for two loving homosexual LGBTQ relationships, a man and a man, a woman, monogamous in a marriage? Is there room for that not to be sinful? I'm not asking you to say there's room for it to be sealed in the temple or a requirement for exaltation. I'm just asking if that specific type of relationship, if there's room for that not to be sinful.
So no,
There's no room.
No.
So
So real quick, just to clarify that.
Yeah.
To say in my understanding of our doctrine is that to say gay marriage is like to say married bachelor. A marriage is defined in our doctrine as the union of a male and female.
Okay.
That is the doctrine. Now, and I brought something up here that we'll get to here in a second. But I wanted to.
But I guess the ideal, I agree with you. The ideal is a man and a woman, because a man and a woman is required for exaltation for an eternal posterity. My question isn't about the ideal. It's not about the ideal. It is about, is there room for it not to be a sinful relationship for two loving men or two loving women to be in a sexual marriage? So monogamous sexual marriage. Is there room for that not to be a sin?
How are you defining sin?
Well, a sin is not obeying the commandments of God. It is disobeying the commandments of God.
So, I think that's a fine definition.
Because
there's I have a broader definition of sin, so there might just be a linguistic thing that's going on here.
So, I guess, does it make you dirty and keep you out of the celestial kingdom?
Yes.
Do you think there's room for that not to be the case? Is there any room in our theology while maintaining the truth claims?
No.
So if in a couple years we come out with the idea that maybe that is the case, the church is no longer true.
Yes. I would no longer sustain the brethren if that were the case. That is a fundamental disagreement. And again, there's a whole conversation to have about that.
I guess because we don't have any scriptures that teach that. We just don't. In context, we don't have any. The only thing we have is Paul's writings, and Paul doesn't even want people to get married in the first place, which is problematic. Okay. So we don't have any scriptures to base that dogmatic teaching off of, that you're basically holding to the truth claims. We have nothing.
So I'm more than happy to have that discussion. In fact,
but I mean,
following up on this, I would actually like, if possible, to do either a discussion on that very topic, on the nature of homosexual behavior in the scriptures, or to do it to even have a formal debate on the subject. I think it would be a really fun one.
I mean, I suck at debating, so
okay. Well, no, but we could do that. My thing is that is a topic that I have actually studied quite a bit on, but it would totally derail us from sort of this particular conversation. Because my thing in this conversation, where I was hoping that we could try and stay on, though I think that's a legitimate topic, a very interesting one, is what Julie Hanks teaches publicly, consistently contradicting the brethren.
So if we're using that example, what would you have done as Julie Hanks' position? You have someone who feels they are happier, they are better in the life that they chose. They feel like they have a better connection with God. They're, in a better state of their life, and they're expressing that to you. What would you have done? What would you have done differently?
I would have been very happy for them.
So what did Julie do wrong? Because she was happy and good with him.
Julie is connecting this to the idea that there is nothing immoral about it, because fundamentally her and you don't believe that there is anything immoral about it. And
I didn't make that claim. But yeah, I would agree that Julie doesn't believe that.
Okay. And so my issue here is this. I think we can agree that at least at times, we don't need to get into how consistent it is, whatever, that a person at times is publicly contradicting the church's doctrines, policies, and its leaders. And my thing is this. So if you actually look in the General Handbook of Instructions, under apostasy is repeatedly acting in clear and deliberate public opposition to the church, its doctrines, its policies, or its leaders. And so while I'm going to leave to the judges in Israel, if she meets that criteria, I'll leave it to them. But I can't help but say this instance of her literally the day after Elder Holland says we can't let our love turn into advocacy to go and post that, and obviously is promoting that there's nothing immoral about homosexual behavior, that is indeed a contradiction to the brethren. Now, you can say that it's right, that she's on the right side of history and that they're wrong. But we do have to admit, it looks as though that falls, at least to some extent, under the, that sort of a definition of apostasy. Is it an act of apostasy to go out publicly and contradict the brethren and its leaders and the church's doctrine?
I mean, sure. Let's just give it to her. Let's say that was a clear act of apostasy. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. When
Okay.
problematic teachings were taught in the past and members came up the next day and opposed those teachings, I don't think they did anything wrong. So if we want to force that as an interpretation of apostasy, fine.
And frankly,
I'm fine
I'm
with
glad
that.
you said that, because one of the things that I don't like is I feel like a lot of times the ball's hidden. People should just come out and be explicit and say, there's nothing wrong with homosexual behavior, so we need to get over this. Because if you're right, the church is in egregious error. Okay? If you were right. And that is, but my thing is that people are intentionally, they want to make an impact, but they don't want to come out and just say it, because they know that it can constitute an act of apostasy and get them in trouble with the church. So Julie, I would say Papa Osler, and a lot of activists in the church are currently out trying to push their ideas, which run contrary to the church, but do it in a way that doesn't run afoul of these policies, of the standard of apostasy. And that's kind of where I kind of take issue with it, because it's like, just be honest, guys. Just come out and say it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, if that's the interpretation we want to force of apostasy, I have no problem with it, and I'll own it. You can call me apostate. It won't bother me whatsoever.
I wouldn't do that. And I don't label her as an apostate. Okay. I do not want to, I'm not going to usurp the power of a judge in Israel to make those determinations. But what I do see is that these acts seem to be getting either on that line or dang close to it. And that to me is worth kind of mentioning to people that are following her, so that they recognize that while she says, I'm a member in good standing and all that stuff, some of her stuff, as you've already said, is, apostate. And so we have to just be aware. Let's be aware and draw the line. Say, yeah, I'm stepping over the line here, but I think the line is wrong. That's my thing. Just be open about it.
Sure. That's fine. Do you think it's wrong though? So let's look back at the November exclusion policy, right?
Uh-huh.
When Jim Bennett came out and wrote how he felt that was problematic,
mm-hmm.
Was that wrong of him to do?
Yeah, I probably would say yes. I believe that that if you have problems with the things that go on within the church, in order to sustain the institutional structure of the church and not to undermine it, you handle those things internally and not through public advocacy. I don't believe that there is, I am very careful on my show not to undermine trust in the brethren, because it's kind of like, okay, you have 12 great brain surgeons. You got to be careful that you don't undermine the trust in those 12 brain surgeons, because if you really think that they are the best brain surgeons and you undermine trust in them, people will start to say, well, I'm not trusting them. They're not trustworthy. And then you end up having people who die because they weren't listening to the counsel of the brain surgeons. So the actual institutional trust matters. And that's why, in my opinion, if you have problems with the brethren, which I do, by the way, I don't think they always get it right. And I have things. And if people ask me, I'll give them my honest opinion on where they're wrong on certain things, but I don't push it. Like, it definitely isn't something I'm doing frequently. And my overall tenor is to support them in every way that I can, especially in public, because I do believe that people should be listening to them, because I do believe that they are trustworthy, even if they might be fallible.
Gotcha. So just to clarify, would you say it is wrong to publicly oppose ideas and practices from church leadership?
Yes.
Okay. So let's pull out interracial marriage. Members should not have pushed back against that publicly.
No, I would say they should push back against that internally within the church. They should be talking to their bishops, their stake presidents, their priesthood leaders, saying, I am really uncomfortable with this.
But what if that doesn't do anything? What if that doesn't go anywhere? Shouldn't the goal of the church to be to get it into the best spot possible as we prepare it for the return of the Savior for the second coming? Why is it wrong to express our frustrations or maybe our concerns publicly? I don't see why that
because
could be wrong.
I would question this. What's our stewardship? I don't have stewardship over the whole church.
But do you need stewardship to have an opinion?
No. I would say that my opinion when it comes to the general matters of the church is to sustain the brethren and to try and further the work that they're trying to put out. If I think they're wrong on some certain point, well, yeah, I might make that known internally, but publicly, I'm going to try and work to further again, going back to this thing, the danger is this, is that if I begin to go and make my points of disagreement, which are very small, I agree with the brethren on, like, why would I spend my time in public talking about the one thing that I disagree with or the two things that I disagree with, rather than talk about all the things that I do agree with? A person who sustains their leaders is trying to help them in all the things that you agree. And if you disagree, it's like, let's go take care of that in-house. It's kind of like you don't talk bad about your wife. If you have a problem with what your wife did, you don't do it in public. You go into your room, you talk about it quietly, but because it messes with the institutional integrity of the church and it hurts people because they lose trust in the brethren.
Gotcha. So like, I get the small things, right? But like big things, interracial marriage, priesthood ban, temple ban, things like that. Those are big, big deals. I don't see any way we can say that members of the church should not have spoke up about those things, that they should have just brought those to their bishops or brought those to their stake presidents.
So what's the purpose of bringing it up publicly?
Yeah, I think it creates an atmosphere where we can, in the church, we can grow and we can change and we can see see good things, see bad things.
There can be social pressure that's created. We're saying we all don't like this. And the hope is that will sway the brethren.
Do you think the brethren can be bound by foolish traditions?
Absolutely.
Then what's the problem with bottom up ideas and hope for improvement?
Because I'm not against it if it flows through the proper channels of priesthood authority.
But if it's not moving through those channels, because it doesn't most times.
It's not my kingdom.
But it's not moving through those channels most of the time. So if Julie wants to post,
my point is so we go around the priesthood channels if we don't get the result that we want. At some point, you have to say, well, I no longer trust the brethren. I think that they are so wrong on a particular issue that you should say these aren't the world's greatest brain surgeons. They're actually a bunch of quacks, because how could they miss this such an obvious thing? And that then you should indeed distance yourself if it's that big of a deal and you can't reconcile it. My thing is, but
I don't think anyone's saying they're quacks. I just think people want to be heard and they're not being heard.
Well, then take it to the Lord and pray that the Lord will touch the hearts of those leaders.
What if, as they take it to the Lord, as many have done, and they feel deeply inspired from the Lord, that their perspective is correct or good, and they want to share that, and they can't do it publicly? They can't post it on Instagram. They can't post on Facebook.
You can. There's a difference between me and you having a conversation like this. Well, even this is public though, but me and you having a private conversation, or me and you both writing a letter to Salt Lake City or to our family or to whoever, and then me going out on CNN and talking about why the church is wrong on X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah, I guess. But then to me that puts malicious intent on it. There's no malicious intent. Jim Bennett writing why he disagrees with the November policy was no malicious intent. It was heartbreak. It was frustration. And I don't understand why that's problematic to express that in a public format. To me, that even deeper, that seems weird that we're not allowed to. It seems almost like, I guess, kind of creepy that, like, oh no, don't go out in public and express these disagreements. You keep that you keep that inside. Keep that inside. I don't understand that.
I would use the exact same analogy that I do with my wife. I don't want to sully my wife's reputation publicly, even though there may be things that she's doing that are wrong.
But
right?
is it
By
is
the way,
it
honey, I love you.
solely
There's nothing. I have nothing to say here that's bad.
is
about
it
you.
is it
Analogy.
harming their reputation, or is it just seeking, to improve? Like, I don't think the wife analogy is great. I think a company analogy would be better, right? You're working for a company and your boss isn't changing or doing something that you would like. So you express on like a company post or on a group chat, whatever, however,
Within the business?
I mean, whatever, or even on Facebook, separate from the business.
Because I'll tell you right now, if you go out and smash your company on CNN, you're going to get
But
fired.
it's not smashing. It's just expressing what you see as a foolish or wicked
Well, that's
tradition.
fine. If it harms the institution of the business, the business will let you go. And the thing is, and there's a reason why. And again, I go back to that brain surgeon analogy. The problem is if you there's something called institutional integrity and trust that matters. And there's a degree to which institutions should be challenged and proper ways to do that within the church. But in my opinion, to go out, there's got to be a line at where it goes too far. And maybe you and I, maybe that's just our difference. We just have differences in the line. Like I said, I'm not like saying you can't go and have conversations with people that you know or whatever about why you disagree with XYZ policy. That's fine. Okay. I'm talking about someone on Instagram who has 100,000 followers, and her followers, believe me, watch her video and her content way more than they watch the brethren, who they get once every 6 months. You know what I'm saying? So when Julie is popping up on your feed every single day, heck, I see her content more than I see content from the brethren. And so that's kind of where I go. Now, before we get kind of stuck here, because
one thought, let me just add this last thought, because to me, where we're kind of stuck here. But I keep seeing you use words like trying to destroy or undermine or hurt the church. And to me, that requires so much malicious intent that isn't there. I don't see any malicious intent on Julie's side. I don't see any malicious intent on Jim Bennett, his side.
I don't necessarily think it's malicious intent.
So I guess why are you using those words?
I don't think there has to be malicious intent.
Like, I guess, why are you using words like destroy and undermine if there's not malicious intent?
You can destroy and undermine things without any malicious intent. I don't think, like, I'm not here to say that Julie Hanks is some terrible person. I don't know Julie Hanks. I don't know her heart. I don't know anything about her. What I'm looking at specifically are both the actions and then what is specifically being said, and then what seems to be happening with some of the like what the effects are, the fruits that are coming of it.
So what if there's good fruits?
From what I've seen, the fruits that are coming out of it are either people staying in the church under false pretenses, or it is people are leaving the church because of it. In fact, people that are related to me have left the church largely due to Julie Hanks' influence. And they've said that she was, her perspectives helped her realize how, wrong the church is. And she helped to undermine her faith in the institution.
So what about the many, many people? Like, I was just on my TikTok live before this, and I was talking about how I was going to have this conversation with you, and multiple people brought up on that TikTok live, because of Julie Hanks, I maintain in the church because of the nuance that she has allowed me to see in the doctrine and the history. I can stay in the church because of that. Is that not good fruit?
No, if it's not under the right pretenses. Because if you tell people a lie and say the church is going to change its doctrine on gay marriage, let's hang in there, guys. We're going to fight for the rights of our LGBT brothers and sisters. And they say, yeah, I'm going to stay in the church and try and make it better. To me, like, no, that's wrong. That's false pretenses. And then to create a Jesus and a church that isn't the Jesus and the church of this church, and then to retain people in to sort of advocate for this new and improved church that she sort of envisions, is an act of fomenting apostasy within the church from people that really should leave if they don't want to embrace the covenant path and the doctrines of the church.
What part of the covenant path requires you to accept every policy as perfectly inspired?
No, I don't think that. But I do think that there are basic doctrines like the family proclamation that if they were to be reversed or undermined would ultimately result in this not being the church that was founded by it would resemble nothing to the church established by Joseph Smith.
But what if they were just added onto? That's all people want. It's just addition onto
they're
the family
contradictory in
proclamation.
nature.
Well, why is that?
Well, that's to get into a very deep subject, but that's just, again, we could go into all my reasons for that. It would take another 2-hour conversation probably. But that at least is where I would go with it. I'd say, look, if you have two things that are irreconcilable and you're saying, well, let's just reconcile them. The problem is that one has to give and the other one has to stay.
So I guess Julie's huge, right? She's a big influencer. If she's really as problematic, and I think I can hear myself a little bit on you. So just a quick heads up. If Julie's really as problematic as I feel like you're suggesting here, why is she still a member of the church? Why did she go up to her? Why did one of her priesthood leaders bring up to her some of the concerns, and then she expressed them to him, and he was like, "Oh no, you're doing a great thing. Keep going." Why do you feel like you're in a position to question the brethren maintaining her membership in the church?
I don't know. The brethren are. I mean, most of these decisions are made at the local level.
They have to be aware of her.
Well, I don't know. But I would say that the decision on whether to excommunicate someone or to take any action at all is ultimately up to the local leadership. I'll let them make that call. Okay. I'll let that.
I guess.
And the thing is if I have a disagreement with them, again, I'll keep it personal and I won't announce it publicly because I don't want to undermine faith in our local leadership either. But what I am saying is I'm just trying to make members aware of what she's saying. And if she is keeping people in the church, she may be doing that by basically getting them under false pretenses. Now, just real quick, because we are running low on time here, is I wanted to share something that one of on the YouTube video that I put, I challenge people to go and look at it. It's really interesting to look at the comments because there were comments like this. I don't know if people can see it. It's kind of small here, but this person says, does she fall within the bounds of apostasy by these few clips? Yep. And good for her. The more people she can help leave the Mormons, the better. We need more voices like hers. Share this with everyone we can get so more people will listen to her. I think it's hilarious that people keep saying someone they know left the church and they discovered that they listened to Dr. Hanks. She's teaching people how to critically think for themselves instead of being handled in spoon-fed beliefs. I never heard of her until these videos, and I'm happy to see people like her are around and have a large Mormon audience. So as I look at that, I go, all right, so I agree with her. Why is she wrong? She obviously doesn't have a stake in saying that Julie Hanks is a wonderful member of the church, and she's like agreeing with me, like, yeah, she's helping get people out by teaching them to go against the brethren.
Yeah. So again, I have a huge problem with the comment highlighting to basically form a perspective against Julie. I can probably go in your comments and get messiness. I can go underneath people who had perspectives on general conference talks and get messiness. I don't really care what the comments say, to be honest with you. But why is she wrong? Because I think Julie is an important part of our church. I don't think she's trying to get people out of the church. I don't think she's pushing people out of the church. In my experience, and the many people I talk to, many people follow Julie Hanks and maintain a conviction in the church. Many people follow Julie Hanks and they disagree with some of the things she says, but they find her valuable. I think the church maintains her membership for a reason. If they really were, I think it's so... I would almost say ignorant to suggest that the church is not aware of the problematic, your problematic interpretations of Julie. They are very much aware of Julie Hanks. She's one of the biggest Mormon influencers out there, the general level. And if there really was a problem, why aren't they doing anything about it?
Well, I'm not going to go down and theorize as to why, because I don't know why. And that ultimately is up to them to say. But what I would say is, I also believe leaders are fallible.
Okay, so that's a whole mess, right? That is an entire mess. Because what makes you more inspired on Julie Hanks than the leadership?
I don't claim to be. All I'm doing is pointing out something that I see as troubling. Something where someone is engaging in acts that even you agree are crossing the line into apostasy. And I want people to be aware of it. I made this video more than anything just to bring awareness to the distinctions that should be made between things that she says and what the brethren say. I mean, you can say Julie's right. Like, fine, go ahead. Say Julie is right on and the brethren are wrong on this. In fact, I want people to be more bold and honest and just say that. But the thing is that people should be aware that there is a line between what she's saying and what the brethren say, and that the people that she is keeping in the church, a lot of the times what she is doing is she's keeping them in the church by saying things like, if you don't want to wear garments, don't wear garments. You know, it's your personal authority. Or porn problem, you know, slavery looks different to everyone, you know, and there are these things that get people to say, okay, I'm inside the church and I don't need to change. Basically, to sum it up, I worry that she's keeping people in the church under false pretenses by telling them they essentially don't have to change, that the church is wrong about certain things, and just basically stay here, stay with us, help me advocate for changes in the church, and eventually we'll get there.
Gotcha. And I would push back a little. There's things I agree with you on. And let me actually do that. Let me offer pushback to Julie. Just give that out there, because I think it's important to go about it the right way. I very, very strongly disagree with how you went about it in this video. And so how I would push back against Julie is I wish Julie would talk more about the good in the church. Sometimes I feel like she's so focused on negative, and you're perfectly clear now too, camera wise. Yeah, I think she gets so caught up in some of the negative aspects of culture and frustrations in the church, she forgets about all the good the church does. And I think a lot of these criticisms about her pushing people out of the church would go away pretty quickly if she talked about the good, if she talked about what good changing for the better, repentance, changing for the better does for us. If she talked about the benefits of mental health the church can provide for you. Push back against things like pornography and stuff. I obviously have pushback there. But I wish it was done in the right way. I think putting like little clips and then brethren, little clip. I've seen that exact same video. Brad Wilcox. I saw that same video 10 times on TikTok, the exact same video, but it was harassing Brad Wilcox. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it's kind. I don't like it.
So let me kind of give you my perspective onto why I made the video the way that I made it, right? So I see her content fairly frequently, right? And my thing is if I mischaracterize something that she said, that it wasn't accurate, like that's what I feel like happens in a lot of those cut up clip videos, or things are taken out of context, or it's not a good representation, or it's a really cynical interpretation of it, or whatever. And my thing is okay, fine. If I do indeed have things that I've said that are not true to what she was trying to convey, right? Like, I think she was trying to convey that there's nothing immoral about what Stacey Harkey is doing now, right? And I don't think I misconstrued her idea, at least, that personal authority is the ultimate authority. I mean, she says the ultimate authority is that, right? And so I feel like, and maybe there's some room for pushback there, and I think we covered some of that ground, but I was putting out there a video that took what she said and tried to contrast it with things the brethren said, and then I said, look, this is the way I see it. If anyone wants to come and clarify it, like, be my guest if I got something wrong here, but I see this as troubling, and I think that members should be aware, because she is very popular, and people should just be aware of, hey, if you're going to follow some of the things Julie says, just be aware those things will, with fairly frequently, you even had said, I think like maybe a couple times a month, she'll put out something that contradicts the brethren. And I just think people should be aware of that.
So I guess, like, do you think she felt, because you mentioned basically your justification for doing a video like that is that you basically invited pushback from other people to come and clarify, right? Do you think doing a video like that invites like pushback specifically from Julie herself? Do you think that makes her feel comfortable coming and having a conversation with you? Or do you think maybe if you did a video where you kindly expressed your disagreement, you pulled prophet quotes, you read them, and You did a video of yourself, put some effort into it. Do you think that would have been more inviting to a conversation?
It may have, but
So
part of the but just that's one of the reasons I want to do this conversation with you.
yeah,
So
no,
people
that's
can see,
that's
like,
fine.
I'm a reasonable guy.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna bite anyone's head off. But also there is something that I want to say, that I wanted to show people that, hey, these aren't just sort of problematic. These are seriously problematic in my mind. They're fundamentally problematic. And so I wanted for the tone of the video to be very serious, in the sense that these are seriously flawed ideas that lead people down really bad paths, in my opinion. Now, if she feels like that's too strong or too threatening, like fine, we can talk about tone. But at the end of the day, if someone made a video like that about me and wanted to have me on and wanted to go through the things that I said to clarify them, by all means. If I would love to, if someone did. Now, granted, if they hit me right down the money and said what I said, I wouldn't go on, because I'd be like, yeah, that's what I said. Deal with it,
Yeah. So I could make the exact same video about Cardin Ellis.
Uh-huh.
Midnight Mormon, your friend, you engage with him quite often, right?
Uh-huh.
I never see huge pushback on him, right?
And maybe you should. Maybe
I think we
need to be
I think we
taken
should,
down.
but I could make a horrific video on Cardin, doing the exact same thing you did, worse, making him look way worse than you made Julie look in that video.
Uh-huh.
But I don't, because I don't think that's productive.
Would you invite him on to clarify?
Yeah, absolutely, I would.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I would.
Make the video. I'd love to see it. We should put this together. You put together the video showing how bad Cardin is, but then you have him on to explain himself and explain why those things are out of context or not understood. Like, I think that's great.
But I'm not going to go and make a hit piece on Cardin, because I don't think that's productive. I can offer my pushback on Cardin's perspectives, or Kwaiku's perspectives, or your perspectives, but I don't see a need to make a video where I pull little clips from apostles and prophets throughout church history.
What if someone
to try to intentionally, I guess, make them look bad?
Well, what if that person was putting out content that was hurting people and driving them out of the church? My perspective is, and I literally from relatives of mine, who have been affected by her ideas, like,
I know multiple people who have left because of Midnight Mormons. Multiple people.
Uh-huh.
Does that give me, I guess, a right to go at them?
Yeah,
the same type of video.
So
what if someone left because?
Here's the thing. My videos that I make videos to contrast truth and falsehood. I like to try and put things that I believe are false next to things that I believe are true, and to invite people to conversation. I did one recently on Richard Osler and his book. I reviewed his book. I did one on Patrick Mason, and me and Patrick had a great discussion about his book on Proclaim Peace. So I will make something where I see the problems. I try and understand the person, what they're trying to get across. I'll make the contrast there, and then I invite discussion. And I don't see a problem in that. If it's a little bit forceful to have someone come out and be like, here's what you said, here's what the church says, good. I think that we need to really figure out where the lines are and what's true. Because what I care about is what's true and what's false.
So are those videos I see all the time from ex-Mormons on TikTok, are those videos fair too? Here's what Brad Wilcox said, here's what the church said, or here's what Jeffrey R. Holland said, here's what this prophet said 20 years ago. Are those videos fair, or why or why not, and why is it fair for Julie?
Depends on what they portray. If maybe they do have things right. If they portray that nowadays the church is saying that we don't have racism, and then they go and show all the stuff about racist statements that were made in the past, I'd say, yeah, you guys are right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's anything unfair about doing that. My concern is what's true. And if someone is saying something untrue that I believe is dangerous and harmful to people, I will speak up and contrast that with the truth, but not in a spirit of vitriolic hatred towards that person. Like I said, I don't know Julie. I don't have anything against Julie. Okay. I honestly don't know her from Adam, but what I do know is that there are things that are being said that seem to contrast with the truth. And I think that it's very important that people know about it, because untruths are dangerous.
Gotcha. So I guess if your goal is to get Julie, show these clips and then bring Julie and let her clarify these, I I don't understand why you wouldn't go about it in the best way to make her feel invited on.
So I wouldn't say that's my primary objective. That's my secondary objective. My primary objective is to just tell the truth, to contrast the truth with the falsehood and not worry so much about the tone. Okay. Just put it out there. And then, but with the understanding that if this is not true, if what I am conveying in this has been misconstrued, please, you can come and correct the record. And I'm hoping, honestly, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was to show people that, look, I'm not going to bite your head off. I'm not going to call you an apostate, run you out. We're going to have a conversation and we're going to try and figure out where we agree and disagree. And there are areas that you and I have disagreed in this conversation, but at the end of the day, it's okay. We can let that be and have that conversation. And what comes of it is clarity. And that's what I want. I want clarity so that people know what's true, what's false, what aligns with the church, what doesn't, so that we can sort where we all, what our objectives are. And again, to know the truth and then to embrace the truth is what I want people to do.
Gotcha. I agree with your intentions. Again, I don't know if we're going to get on the same page here. I don't think it was handled right. But yeah, again, I don't want to keep beating the dead horse here. So
no, and that's fine.
Yeah,
we can understand the nature of our disagreement. We don't have to come up with a consensus on everything. Well, we're about out of time here. I want to thank you for coming on. Most people don't have the guts. I actually ask a lot of people hey, you disagree with me? Come on. I hope we've had a conversation that at least can show that two people can disagree without yelling at each other and can sort through issues. I wish you the best with your channel, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Do you feel like you came out with a new perspective at all? Any ground gained here, or do you think we're both still as separate as we began?
I think the ground gained was clarification. I think I'm more aware of your positions, and you're hopefully more aware of mine. And I understand now, where we agree and disagree, right? A little bit better. And to me, that's valuable. I don't look at conversations of disagreement with the idea that we're going to gain consensus. I mean, that's nice if we do, but to clarify the nature of our disagreement. And I think that's the first step. Trying to resolve it, that's kind of a second step. And I do think we have some great things that we could potentially, we didn't get into a lot of the weeds per se on some of these issues. And I think that's where we could have some fun in the future. So at some point we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Cool. All right, Bridger. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Take care. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want more content, including the podcast, go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thanks for watching.